There are people who spend their entire lives becoming indispensable to everyone around them. They are the ones that everybody calls, the ones who solve every problem, the ones who carry everyone else's burdens. And society calls them generous. However, we need to ask ourselves a different question. Who are you when nobody needs you? Hi, my name is Shobha, and I'm a trained counselor. And if you are the type of person who turns up for everyone in your life and often find that that is at the expense of your own life, please stay tuned. I'm going into a 3-part series of why we do what we do and how we can resolve that so that we can turn up authentically in our lives as well. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, today's topic is when helping others becomes a way of avoiding yourself. Now there is something universally admirable about people who dedicate themselves to helping others. They are the first to volunteer when something needs doing. These are the people that answer the phone at inconvenient hours. They stay behind after everyone else has gone home. They notice suffering that other people overlook and instinctively move towards it rather than away from it. Our society tends to celebrate people like this. We give them awards, tell stories about them, and hold them up as examples of moral virtue. We call them selfless, compassionate, generous. We reassure ourselves that the world is a better place because people like them exist, and often it is. There is no question that civilization itself depends upon people who are willing to sacrifice for something larger than themselves. Parents sacrifice for their children. Nurses sacrifice for their patients. Firefighters risk their lives for strangers. Volunteers give up weekends to serve communities they may never personally benefit from. Without people willing to care, society slowly begins to unravel. So let me say something that may initially sound uncomfortable. And that is, not every act of helping is psychologically healthy. And that statement is easily misunderstood. I am not arguing against kindness. I am not suggesting that generosity is secretly selfish, nor am I saying that every person who devotes themselves to others is compensating for some hidden wound. Many people genuinely help because they possess a secure, integrated sense of self. They give because they have something to give. Their generosity flows from abundance rather than deprivation. But psychology has taught us something deeply important. The same behavior can arise from entirely different psychological motivations. A person may spend their weekends volunteering because they have discovered meaning in service, and another may spend those very same weekends volunteering because being needed is the only time they feel valuable. And from the outside, these two individuals look almost identical. Internally, however, they inhabit completely different psychological worlds. And this distinction has fascinated me for a long time, not because of an abstract theory I encountered in a psychology textbook, but because of someone I once knew. This person was, without exaggeration, one of the kindest people I have ever met. He worked extensively with troubled young people through his church. He had trained as a community first responder, keeping his emergency response applications switched on so that if someone nearby experienced a cardiac arrest or required immediate assistance, he would receive an alert and rush to help. This wasn't something he did once or twice. I mean, he often responded countless times. Whenever we spoke, there always seemed to be another story about someone he had helped, another crisis he had stepped into, another person whose burden he had chosen to carry. Even in ordinary conversation, this orientation towards helping was unmistakable. If I mentioned I was struggling with something, his immediate response was never one of detached sympathy. Instead, he would ask, "What can I do to make this easier for you?" And it was incredibly sincere. He genuinely wanted to help. As I came to know him, I admired that quality immensely. In many ways, he embodied the kind of person most of us aspire to become. Dependable, reliable, compassionate, someone who showed up. But over time, I began noticing something that I could not quite put into words. Not something wrong, but something that was incomplete. And the more I observed his life, the more I realized that while he seemed endlessly available for everyone else, he appeared strangely absent from his own life. He was extraordinarily committed to improving the lives of other people, yet many aspects of his own remain completely neglected. His education had stalled. His long-term career had not significantly progressed. His own aspirations seemed permanently postponed. Everywhere I looked, I saw energy flowing outwards, but very little flowing inwards. At first, I wondered whether this was simply the inevitable cost of being generous. After all, time is finite. And if we devote ourselves to serving others, naturally there will be less time available for ourselves. But the more I reflected, the more I suspected something deeper was taking place. And perhaps what unsettled me the most was not that I recognized it in him, it was that I recognized it in myself. So for much of my own life, I derived an enormous sense of purpose from being useful. I enjoyed solving problems. I enjoyed supporting people through difficult periods. I found satisfaction in becoming someone others could rely on. And there is nothing inherently unhealthy about those traits. Indeed, they can become some of our greatest strengths. But every strength has a shadow. Psychologist Carl Jung famously observed that what remains unconscious eventually directs our lives, while we imagine ourselves to be acting freely. That sentence has stayed with me for years because it captures something profoundly unsettling about human nature. We often believe we understand why we do what we do. In reality, however, our conscious explanations frequently arrive long after our unconscious motivations have already chosen our direction. We tell ourselves we are working long hours because we are ambitious, but perhaps we are trying to prove our worth. We tell ourselves we seek achievement because we enjoy success, or perhaps we're just terrified of failure. We tell ourselves we cannot stop helping because we are compassionate. But perhaps compassion is only one part of the story. Carl Jung also said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Whether or not the wording is exactly as history remembers it, the idea remains psychologically profound. Much of human behavior is not driven by deliberate choice. It is driven by identities we unconsciously constructed over years, and sometimes over decades. And identity is one of the most powerful organizing forces in psychology. Most people imagine identity as a collection of facts. For example, you may say, I'm a teacher, or I'm a parent, or I'm an engineer, or I'm an artist. But psychologists increasingly understand identity differently. Identity is not merely what we are. Identity is the story through which we interpret reality. It quietly answers questions we rarely stop to ask. Who am I? Why do I matter? What gives my life significance? How do I earn love? And what must I do to belong? Every human being answers these questions somehow. often without realizing it. And once those answers become embedded within us, they begin shaping our behavior automatically. If I unconsciously believe that my value comes from achievement, I will organize my life around succeeding. If I believe my worth depends on being admired, I will pursue admiration. If I believe I matter only when I'm indispensable, I will make my life making myself indispensable. Notice something important. None of these identities are inherently true. They are narratives, psychological constructions, interpretations formed through thousands of interactions across childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Yet once accepted, they become astonishingly powerful because identity always seeks confirmation. It quietly creates situations that reinforce itself. Someone who believes they are fundamentally unlovable becomes hypervigilant for signs of rejection. Someone convinced they are a failure notices every mistake while overlooking every success. Likewise, someone who believes their value lies in being needed unconsciously seeks opportunities to become necessary. And this is where helping can begin to change. At first, helping is simply something we do. Then it becomes something that we enjoy. Eventually, if we are not careful, it becomes who we are. And that transition changes everything. Because once helping becomes an identity rather than an action, we are no longer entirely free to choose it. We become psychologically dependent on it. We stop asking, does this person actually need my help? Instead, another question quietly emerges beneath our awareness. Who am I if nobody needs me? That is not a question about generosity, it is a question about existence. Existential psychologist Viktor Frankl argued that one of humanity's deepest need is the need for meaning. Human beings can endure astonishing levels of suffering if they believe their lives possess purpose. But what happens when our sense of purpose becomes attached to only one role? What happens when meaning itself becomes conditional? What happens when our answer to the question, why do I matter, becomes because other people depend on me? That identity appears noble, it even earns admiration, but beneath its virtue may lie a subtle fragility. Because if our worth depends on being needed, then every independent friend, every grown child, every resolved crisis, every healthy boundary becomes an unconscious threat. Not because we resent other people's growth, but because their growth quietly asks us to confront a terrifying possibility. Perhaps they no longer needed us, and if they no longer need us, who are we? That, I believe, is where our exploration truly begins. Not with helping, not with kindness, not even with people-pleasing, but with a far deeper question that sits beneath them all. Can a human being believe they possess inherent worth before they have done anything at all? If you have watched until the end of the video, I thank you very much. This is just part 1 of the series. Please stay tuned for part 2, which is coming up in the next video. Thank you and have a blessed day ahead. Bye.
If you spend any time online, you've heard it a million times. It's the universal sign-off, the creator's mantra. Like, share, subscribe. We hear it so often it's just kind of become background noise, right? But what if I told you those 3 little words aren't just a polite request? They're actually a powerful set of commands that literally shape the internet you experience. So let's just put it all together one more time. Liking is your vote for quality. Sharing is your tool for expansion. And subscribing is your act of community building. Every single click has a distinct and vital impact on the digital world we all live in. So, the next time you hear that familiar sign-off, remember this. You are not just passively watching something. You are an active participant. You are a curator, deciding what content deserves to be seen. You're an amplifier, giving it a bigger voice. And you're a patron, supporting the creators that you really value. So remember, your clicks have real weight. They actually shape the internet that we all share. They can elevate an unknown artist, they can spread a vital idea, or they can build a global community. You hold that power in your hands. The only question left is, now that you know the code, how are you going to use it?